Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Come on in. Find yourself a seat. It's wonderful to see you all here this evening, and isn't it great to be in a full room like this? Welcome. Good evening, and welcome to the 2026 Laing Lectures. Thank you. We're so glad that you've taken the time to join us this evening. My name is Paul Spilsbury. I'm the president here at Regent, and it's a delight to welcome you to this year's Laing Lectures. I want to especially welcome the members of this community, the students of Regent College, the faculty, many faculty colleagues scattered throughout the room, and of course many staff colleagues as well. It's lovely to have each one of you, and many friends and supporters of Regent over the years, many familiar faces, and also some new faces. Thank you for coming from across the city and perhaps from further away as well. Also want to especially welcome members of the wider UBC community. It's always good to have you here as well, including folks from Vancouver School of Theology and St. Mark's, as well as from Trinity Western University and other institutions across this area. So thank you for coming and for joining in this very special occasion. Regent, as I'm sure you know, is a place where in our courses and in our programs and in our public events, we seek to explore the significance of Christian understanding for every area of life. We are a community that asks what difference Christ makes for the world, for the marketplace, for society, for the arts, for science and technology, indeed for all of life. And every year, the Laing Lectures plays a very significant public role in the pursuit of this deeper sense of the significance of Christian faith for today's world. The Laing Lectures that we are a part of now, the Laing Lectures began at Regent College in 1999 and are made possible through the generosity of Roger and Carol Laing in honor of Roger's father, Bill Laing, a much-loved and profoundly influential pastor in the great city of Calgary, Alberta. Pastor Bill Laing was a man whose ministry impacted many generations of Christians, not only in Alberta, but around the world. Indeed, my own father-in-law, Dr. Alan Ironside, attended his church in the 1950s and was inspired, partly through that ministry, to spend a lifetime of missionary service in India. So there's a family connection as well. Bill was a person who loved ideas, loved great conversations, and would have loved everything that these Laing Lectures are about. The intent of the Laing Lectures is to encourage individuals recognized for scholarship, wisdom, and creativity to undertake original thinking about a matter of significance for the Christian church and to share their thinking with the Regent community and with the general public through a series of lectures. Some of our lecturers over the years have included author Neil Postman, novelist Marilyn Robinson, poet Malcolm Guite, psychiatrists Ian McGilchrist and Kurt Thompson, philosopher Charles Taylor, sociologist Peter Berger, and theologians Miroslav Volf and Stanley Harwas, among others. We're particularly delighted this evening that our sponsor, the sponsor of these lectures, Roger Laing, is with us tonight. Roger, thank you. It's a pleasure to host Roger always, whose generous support continues to make these lectures possible, and we're very grateful for you, Roger. And now it is my joy to introduce our host for these lectures tonight and tomorrow night, Dr. David Robinson. Dr. David S. Robinson is the R. Paul Stevens Associate Professor of Marketplace Theology and Leadership. He's the author of Christ and Revelatory Community and Bonhoeffer's Reception of Hegel, along with numerous other articles and essays. He's also the director of the MA in Leadership, Theology, and Society here at Regent, And so he comes now to host our evening. Please join me in welcoming him.
Let me add my warm welcome to you also. It's good to see such a large audience here. Faith-based ethics in a world of powerful AI. This is obviously a vital topic for our societies, whether people are navigating the job market or planning a military strategy. And I'm delighted that tonight we have an excellent speaker on this topic that I'll be introducing momentarily. I'll begin, though, with a few quick announcements. First, please silence all electronic devices. It's all right if Claude or Grok want to listen in tonight, but they're not to interrupt, especially Grok. For those of you joining us in person, this session is being live streamed and recorded under the conditions spelled out in the public notice on the door. And our schedule tonight is as follows. Dr. Sullivan will speak for 60 minutes, after which we'll have a formal response from a Regent faculty member, and then a live Q&A. So there'll be an opportunity both for those of you who are here in person to speak at one of the mics, and for those online to submit their questions electronically. We'll end at 9 p.m., and we'll have a book signing and a chance to engage with the speaker more informally afterwards as well. Now to introduce tonight's speaker. Dr. Megan Sullivan is the Wilsey Family College Professor of Philosophy at the University of Notre Dame. I think that's how it's pronounced in America. Where she is also director of a university-wide ethics initiative and founding director of the Institute for Ethics and the Common Good. Those roles involve work on another center, lab, and a major new project that you'll hear about tonight and which you can read about on our Laing Lectures website. What I want to highlight this evening for you is that Dr. Sullivan is a thought leader in the truest sense. She not only articulates significant theories, she not only thinks big thoughts, she builds institutions and empowers people to act accordingly. She's a thought leader in the truest sense. When it comes to significant theory, Dr. Sullivan is a philosopher in the classical sense, addressing how to live the good life. She is co-author with Paul Blaschko of the book, The Good Life Method, Reasoning Through the Big Questions of Happiness, Faith, and Meaning, published with Penguin, as well as the book Time Biases, A Theory of Rational Planning and Personal Persistence, published with Oxford University Press. When it comes to institution and people building, she is very committed, as you'll learn tonight, to engaging well with people, whether they're working in a frontier AI lab or serving in a faith community, or indeed both. Having spent this morning in a seminar with her, I'm confident you'll be encouraged by her leadership in this vital area. So here to give her first lecture, The Delta Framework, Where is the Christian Voice in AI Ethics? Please give a warm Regent College welcome to Dr. Megan Sullivan. Great to have you.
Good evening. David, I usually adjust the mic upward because I'm so tall when I come to the podium, but this might be the first time in years I've had to adjust it downward because you're even taller. Thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you to President Spilsbury, to the Laing family, and to all of you for being just phenomenal hosts to me on this trip. I've been looking forward to giving these lectures since I was first invited this past summer. It's a tremendous honor to be named with the luminaries that have given these lectures in previous years. I don't quite feel up to the task, and probably after this, President Spilsbury will feel the same way. But it is just an extraordinary honor to have the opportunity to be with you guys in your community. I learned in the seminar this morning with Jens and his colleagues at the Houston Center that Jim Houston, who's been an important leader in your community, passed away last weekend. And I just want to take a moment for us as a community to note the incredible legacy that people like Jim Houston have provided to those of us who are coming now doing this very important work of bringing Christian thinking, Christian theology and philosophy to bear on topics that I'm sure when Regent was founded were barely possibilities of things that this college would have to wrestle with. One of the things that's very exciting about being in a community like this is realizing that we have the intellectual and spiritual and moral resources to handle any manner of complicated questions that could have never been foreseen by people who established this college, but they had the foresight to build a community with these traditions, with these charisms and virtues that were going to prepare all of us and generations of students to come to be able to do this work. So I feel very fortunate and grateful also to the founding leaders of Regent College for creating the environment with which we're able to have this conversation here tonight. I come from the Roman Catholic tradition. We call it Notre Dame. The late Pope Francis, who passed away last year, is one of my intellectual heroes. And in his big encyclical, like his big thought leadership letter 10 years ago, Laudato Si, he talks about the notion that Christians cannot slow down technological progress. Like if you think that we can, it's quixotic. It's like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. We can't stop it. What we can do is try to encourage a growth in conscience that's proportional to the growth of our technological capacities. And that's really the role that Christian communities play, is we are growth hormones for society, helping them get bigger and stronger faster so that they can deal with the kinds of decisions that they're being faced with. And that really is going to be the theme of this first Laing lecture, is what are the prospects for Christian communities of many diverse stripes to serve as a kind of conscience accelerator for a society that is now being utterly transformed by powerful artificial intelligence. And to set the stage for us to have a conversation about this topic, I think it's helpful for us to remember that there have been other points in modern human history when we've had to do this ethical growth spurt. This is not something that only we have to deal with, though it's been a minute since we've really been faced with a challenge this profound. I want us to think back to August 1945. So World War II is raging. On August 6, 1945, at around 10:45 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, you would have been one of many millions of people on planet Earth to wake up to a double-barreled, shocking announcement from Harry Truman. A telegram would have gone out telling you two things about the world that you really had no clue were possible beforehand. First, Truman opens the telegram by saying, "Hey, Americans," he's addressing this mostly to people in my country, "you might not have realized this, but for the last few years, we have invested $2 billion in what Truman calls the greatest scientific gamble in human history. And we won. We have pursued this aggressive, relentless battle of the labs, and we have learned how to split the atom and to harness one of the most fundamental powers in the universe." So there is science that is unimaginable. Maybe in science fiction would have been on your radar before, but now, unbeknownst to you, there's been the Manhattan Project and the secret project to learn how to split the atom. We spent $2 billion of your money on it, and we've succeeded. Rejoice, America. We know what the second part of his announcement was. We have used that discovery to build a weapon that's 2,000 times more powerful than any bomb previously known to man, and we have deployed that bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, in an effort to once and for all end the war. So two big announcements. The first phase of it is just a startling realization. Oh my gosh, look at what science is capable of. I feel so proud that we're able to conduct really big studies like this. And then the second announcement, oh my gosh, 100,000 people just obliterated in one single day by a bomb that is just thousands and thousands of times more powerful than anything we could imagine. And this is a group of humans that have lived through World War I and World War II at this point. Like just a shocking, stunning development. Back in August 1945, we didn't have the 24-hour news cycle we had now. Like now, the New York Times would be live tweeting the Truman telegram as soon as it was coming out. But back then, you had to wait an entire day to get the sort of critical digestion of a big news story like this. And so on August 7th, 1945, Hanson Baldwin, who was the military editor for the New York Times, he wrote his piece for the Times about what this means for human civilization. He had 24 hours to put it together, and I find it very moving what he found the insight to say in those 24 hours. He turned to the Christian scripture, and in particular, the book of Hosea, Hosea 8. So the book that's dealing with the Israelites after they have made the golden calf and angered God and sent themselves scattered into the wilderness yet again. And he says, President Truman says that we have just ended the war. We have sown the wind, but we will reap the whirlwind. It's amazing. One, it's amazing that we used to live in an era when the New York Times would quote scripture, like non-ironically to make a point. Now they would be Googling, like, what part of it, where does that quote come from? Is it Shakespeare? One, that a New York Times military editor would just have enough kind of conversational knowledge of Christian text to be able to realize that there was a very profound text to turn to in this moment. But two, that he would pick a text that really underscores the need for scientific humility, like that really underscores we are not God. The things that we build, the idols that we create to try to solve our problems can end up, in fact, just multiplying them. And certainly, I mean, the concept of the Cold War did not exist on August 6, 1945. It very much was a kind of secular prophecy of we might have felt like we have just built something very powerful that's going to solve all of our problems forever, but that's not the way it works with humans. We sow the wind, but we reap the whirlwind. In the 20th century, there were some earth-shattering transformations. The development of nuclear weapons should certainly go in the banks as one of them, but we also saw some phenomenal political transitions. The civil rights movements that happened in India and then later in the US South dramatically changed how the world thinks about human rights. One of the most interesting things about both the Cold War and the civil rights movement is as we were undergoing these tectonic social transformations, Christians really did have a seat at important tables, at least in the Western world, as we were wrestling with these questions. So figures like the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr served on the Council of Foreign Relations, or at least advised key members of the Council of Foreign Relations. He was sitting there in the room as key discernment was happening about how the U.S. should wage the Cold War. Prominent figures like Martin Luther King Jr. helped organize the civil rights movement and root them in black churches in the South. There are countless faith leaders of those churches in Alabama and Mississippi who will never go down in history as being remotely as famous as Dr. King, but who became very prophetic leaders because of their faith in those movements. Christianity in the Cold War and in the civil rights movement and other key developments in the 20th century definitely had a seat at the table. In the 21st century, especially in the development of the internet and social media, the first kind of what we now recognize as the first major wave of the digital revolution, Christians were largely asleep at the switch, or at the very least were not deeply engaged in these debates. And there's a variety of explanations we can have for why there was no Martin Luther King or Reinhold Niebuhr about the internet. One explanation is that some faith traditions, including my own Roman Catholic tradition, the dawn of the digital revolution was basically perfectly coincided with the sexual abuse crisis. So my faith community had very little social capital to spend on talking about big issues that were affecting the broader culture in the early 2000s, late 1990s, when the church was at one of its lowest points for social trust. I think another explanation you hear quite a bit, and I'm not sure if I believe this or not, but one explanation I hear quite a bit is that the digital revolution, unlike some of these other revolutions, was concentrated in these elite, highly secular geographic regions of North America, Silicon Valley, Boston, where there just were not a lot of religious people to pay attention to what was going on, and then they just grew out of hand. This is a map from an article that The Atlantic put up, basically arguing that there were no Christians in this region until very recently. I look at this, and you've got the angels. They try to make a joke. I'm going to tell you in a second, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a study that we did with the Lilly Endowment. I don't think that this narrative is entirely accurate. I think that there are, in fact, and were plenty of Christians that are working in Silicon Valley and that are working in these tech hubs. But Christianity is not a movement or a powerful interest group in these regions the same way that black churches would have been a movement and a powerful social group in the era of the Civil Rights Movement. I think probably the best explanation for why Christians whiffed on the digital revolution is that literally everyone missed the ball on the digital revolution. There were just no organizations that were asking the prescient, interesting, ethical questions as we launched the internet and then the era of social media. It just happened really quickly. It was pretty cool. It was unlike any kind of technological development that we have ever witnessed in recent modern history. And so nobody was taking a step back and asking very profound moral questions about what it would mean to live a good life or build a good society in the era of social media. We now realize 20 years later, I think that that was a mistake, that there were some questions we really should have been asking at the time, but we just weren't there. I think, the first of many claims, I was encouraged by the organizers of the Laing lecture to make bold claims, so I'm going to do that, and I'm definitely going to do it tomorrow night. First bold claim I will make to you here gathered live and to the internet tonight is that Christians should not be asleep at the switch for the AI revolution that we're now observing. That we have a very socially important role to play in the bigger cultural discussions about this issue, and it starts immediately. It starts now. It would be a grave mistake if we slept through this conversation. Why is that? Well, one, the advent of powerful and commercially available forms of artificial intelligence are causing a whole lot of people, not just religious people, to start asking some very profound questions about what constitutes a good life and what is a good society. Anytime there's this huge technological growth spurt that also affects our individual day-to-day lives, these ethical questions arise. In my tradition, ethics is nothing more and nothing less than just the idea that we should inquire as to what is ultimately good for our lives and society. In the AI world, there's this term, the singularity, that was popularized by a futurist science fiction writer named Ray Kurzweil. The singularity is basically the imagined, I hope science fiction, moment where AI becomes so powerful that it takes over the world, the kind of Terminator 2 scenario. I loved that movie as a kid too. I feel like I've been training for this. The singularity is the moment when AI takes over the entire world. And I hope that that's either a long way off or never occurs. We can talk about this in Q&A. I guess I'm a singularity skeptic. But I also believe in something that I would call a personal singularity. This is the moment when you realize that a powerful artificial intelligence product has changed some important dimension of your world. If you're a high school or college teacher, maybe it's the moment that you realized your students can immediately produce essays that you cannot detect were not written by them. I remember for me, my personal singularity hit in December 2022. I had just gotten done with my semester. I'd gone to visit my parents and my brothers in rural Virginia, and I was working on the syllabus for my big God in the Good Life course at Notre Dame, and I was typing away on the couch, and my brother, who's really snarky, my baby brother, was like, this is such a joke. You're wasting your time. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm a great professor. He's like, you're wasting your time. He's like, your students can do any homework question you could possibly give them. They can do them on their phones right now without giving it a second thought. I'm like, never. I could totally tell when students are cheating. He's like, I bet you can't. Like, give me 3 homework questions. And ChatGPT had just hit the mass market. He had it on his cell phone at that point. He's like, boop, boop, boop. Types it in. Oh my gosh, ChatGPT is getting at least an A- in God in the Good Life. That December was my personal singularity. Like, all of my assumptions about what it means to be a philosophy professor, they have to be rethought right now. Maybe you hit your personal singularity in your workplace when your boss says, start learning how to use AI to do everything or you're going to be fired. Maybe your personal singularity hits as a parent when you realize, oh my gosh, there are kids at my child's school who are developing friendships and relationships with simulated chatbots. Maybe the personal singularity hasn't come for you yet, and if so, like, God bless you. Maybe you'll be able to avoid it. But for all of us, we are hitting these moments. You see, if you read the New York Times, the Atlantic, or the Wall Street Journal, there's a story now every single day about some new dimension of our life that's being disrupted in good and bad ways by this powerful technology. Second, I hope, kind of startling claim for tonight that's worth us debating is Christians have a whole lot to say about how to navigate these questions. We have a lot of insight to offer, but we are not being featured in any of these articles. We want to get to the bottom of why that is. I don't know how much you guys need me to inculcate a sense of urgency. This will be the first of the scary slides I'll show you, but if you come tomorrow night, I'm going to show you a really terrifying slide, a slide that if you haven't had your personal singularity yet, tomorrow I'm going to show you one that's going to cause you to lose sleep for the rest of the week. This one is just, even if you think AI is overhyped, or you're not totally sold on the software and its business purposes, in North America, in the US economy and the Canadian economy, so many other people have bet the entire economic farm that AI is going to be the most important thing in our economy for the rest of our natural lives, that even if this is a bubble, it's still making its own news. Like, at this point, you look at this graph, the font's a little bit small. This is a grant from the Human-Centered AI Lab at Stanford, and it only goes up to 2023, but you see ChatGPT hits the mass market in November 2022, and suddenly $25 billion are being invested in creating powerful forms of artificial intelligence and selling you commercial products to do everything from telling you how to drive your car, to book your vacations, to teach your children how to read, etc. Like, that much money just by itself changes our way of life. And that was 2023. You look at the numbers right now, and they're easily in the hundreds of billions of dollars. There's some projections, if the economic bubble doesn't burst next year, will be a $1 trillion investment in a single form of software technology in the coming years. This makes its own news. As we at the University of Notre Dame were starting to wrap our heads around what it means to be a Catholic university in the era of powerful artificial intelligence. In 2024, the Lilly Endowment, which is a very generous philanthropy in Indianapolis, Indiana, they approached us. One of Lilly's big philanthropic interests is the future of the Christian religion, and in particular, how are Christian communities thinking about their future? How are they being formed? How are they navigating various shocks, everything from disaffiliation to major scandals to just the ordinary run-of-the-mill problems that pastors and ministry communities face? How do you train the next generation of pastors? How do you recruit them? What do you teach them? Lilly has, for many decades, been involved with that. They approached us in 2024, I apologize, and said, we're very curious about how the Catholic world and how Notre Dame in particular is seeing these AI trends. And we said, I don't know, we're Catholics, like we take decades, if we're lucky, to think about anything. We're just now beginning to think about AI, like we're still wrestling with the internet. And our colleagues at Lilly were very gentle and nice, and they're like, well, we don't feel like we have decades to think about this. We would prefer to think about it a little bit more intensely and also ecumenically. They had a very good hypothesis, which is one that I deeply share, which is that there are plenty of issues that drive apart the various Christian denominations. Artificial intelligence is not one of them. This is one where the kind of key tenets and fundamentals of Christian anthropology and Christian ethics are things that across Christian denominations we can agree and make common cause on. I'm going to try to prove that to you in a second. But Lily said, we would love if you guys, your research institute, which at this point was about 2 months old, we'd love if your research institute did a research project for us of just looking into what Christians from various backgrounds are saying about artificial intelligence. And after a little back and forth, we narrowed it to 2 questions that we were really interested in. What's keeping Christians in various sectors up at night around AI? Like, what's worrying them? What do they think is the most socially relevant problems that we need to be paying more attention to? And second, a bit more positively, what do they think Christians uniquely have to contribute to these debates? Because it might be that something's keeping you up at night, but you actually think the solution is going to come from a different sector. And we did find some problems like that. But what do Christians uniquely have to contribute, and what's keeping you up at night? And what we did is over 150 one-hour benchmarking calls with pastors, with Christians who work at major tech firms or venture capital firms that are funding AI startups, Christians who work at large research universities, and some that work at Christian colleges and seminaries who are teaching and preparing people to think about these issues, journalists who cover the Christian beat regardless of their personal religious persuasions, journalists at major outlets who try to cover developments in religion, and think tanks who work with Christian organizations. We did over 150 of these interviews. Once we did about 50 or so of the one-off interviews, we realized it'd be even more interesting to get the most enthusiastic interviewees together in real life to see how they relate to each other and each other's different ideas. So we put on 4 focus groups, 5 if you count one we added on at the end in Park City, Utah. We went on 4 focus groups where we got various technologists, pastors, professors, journalists together for these 4-hour monster dinners, one in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area, one in Boston, one in Washington, D.C., one at Notre Dame, where we basically gave them those 2 questions, gave them a little bit of prompting about what we'd been learning so far, pulled the string, and let them rip. And we learned a few things from these discussions that became very relevant to the project, which we've now launched. Here are kind of 4 big insights that came from our study last year. And maybe some of these will feel obvious in a seminary community. They felt like big insights to some of our conversation partners. 1, powerful forms of artificial intelligence are forcing some pretty interesting questions about just what it means to be a human being and what human flourishing looks like. And this isn't because people are suddenly rushing to take philosophy classes, though I hope it'll be a banner year for our major. But it's because these very powerful forms of AI, unlike other commercial software that we engage with, it behaves like a human. It has a personality. It does things that are in uncanny valley. It does things that we used to think only we did. And that, plus the just obsession with covering AI in all forms of media, means suddenly people are inundated with questions and debates and discussions about what makes being a human being special. Second is, it is wrong, and this maybe add this to the controversial claims at the Laing lecture tonight. It's wrong to think that people working in Silicon Valley and in big tech are not religious. One, there are a lot of like Orthodox, Catholics, evangelical Christians, Protestants that work in and around these big tech companies. You just don't hear them talking about their religion very much because they work 100 hours a week making powerful AI. But in these tech communities, there are also a lot of movements that play a religion role in people's lives that try to answer this question: what is it to be a good human being? And frankly, there's kind of a new startup religion every month in these communities, because the folks who are working on powerful artificial intelligence are highly educated, very intellectually curious people that don't only wonder about how to make their AI more powerful, they also wonder about these big existential questions. So there is a lot of demand for philosophy, theology, and these kinds of insights in these various spaces, but there's also a lot of weird stuff. And one of the things that we heard frequently from the folks that we talked to, which was not a random sample, these were already people that had some faith background, was that they look around at what they're offered and what their friends are getting into, and they wish that there was more depth. One of the things that I think is very interesting, if you spend some time on Stanford's campus, we've gotten a chance to spend a great deal of time at Stanford, have some fantastic conversation partners there. You go in the Stanford bookstore, and the philosophy and theology section, it's like one row with 5 shelves on it. I know, because I went to check and see if they had my book. They did not. It's like one shelf. If you look at the business and management section, it's 2 massive rows. It takes up like half of the bookstore. And that kind of tells you a little bit about where the intellectual curiosity is being driven at one of these major universities in Silicon Valley right now. It's very focused on the new, what can be started up, what's a pioneering ethical program, a pioneering company idea. Not so much a taste or even an understanding of where the depth could come from. And that was something we heard quite a bit. Third, I think, and this is a lesson I think more places like Regent and Notre Dame just really have to take a moment and reckon with. A lot of folks shared with us that they thought the reason why people were turning to AI products that were being marketed to them is not because they think that an AI reading tutor or an AI travel agent or an AI psychiatrist is better than a human version of those various roles, but just because the healthcare system, the school system, their current church system was not meeting their needs, was failing. One of the most interesting insights we had, we talked to a lot of teachers and a lot of non-higher ed educators, especially in the second half of the grant process. Hear from a lot of folks who say, of course, the parents in my community would prefer that their 5-year-old learn how to read from a caring human being. Everybody prefers that their child learn reading and numeracy from a loving, caring human kindergarten teacher. But if your school has still not recovered from the pandemic and just has a major shortage of literacy instructors, and the option is your child not learning how to read or learning to read from a tablet with an AI that's designed for literacy education for 5-year-olds, you're going to pick the AI over nothing. And that's frequently a choice that people are being offered because the human providing institution is just not up to the task anymore. Finally, there were a lot of folks who thought it was really cute that we were doing this study. No, this wasn't the majority, but it was a loud minority of the people we talked to who came in like, hey, we're from the University of Notre Dame. The Catholics are here to ask you about technology. And folks would say, that's really great, that's cute. Like, you guys do not have a snowball's chance in Hades of making any difference given that previous slide of how much money and power is involved in this. Like, there is no chance for religious groups, certainly the kind of fragmented religious communities that currently exist in North America, to have any impact in this debate. One comment that somebody shared with me at a dinner we had just a couple months ago, so after we finished this focus group process, but it's really stuck with me. We chatted about it a bit this morning at the Houston Center. It was that we invited people to a dinner to talk about these questions. What does Christian ethics look like in the era of AI? And one of the dinner participants, who's a software engineer in the area, very well-meaning, the kind of person who took a few hours out of his Wednesday night to come to a conversation about ethics and AI, about 20 minutes in, looks at me and kind of shakes his head and smiles. And he's like, you do realize there are only 300 to 400 people on planet Earth right now who matter. They're the people who are building the frontier models and the vanishingly small number of political leaders that have the capacity to potentially regulate them. They're the only people that matter. Everybody else, we're just along for the ride. Have you guys seen the movie Interstellar? This guy didn't make this analogy, but this is what I thought of thinking about his comment afterwards. In Interstellar, spoiler alert, there's this one phase where the astronauts, they land on this planet, and it's a beautiful planet, and they look off in the distance what they think is a really beautiful mountain range. And it turns out it's a gigantic tidal wave that's about to overtake them. This guy's view is like the Catholics and the evangelicals, we're like the little astronauts who think that we can control or at least comprehend this thing that's coming towards us when in reality it's just going to wash us away. I remember, I've thought quite a bit about that person's comment in the last few months, and it came from a very well-meaning place. I mean, we'd literally ask these folks, like, show us around, tell us how things are working in Silicon Valley right now. But that ideology just could not be more antithetical to how Christians think about power and determinism. Like by the way, the 300 to 400 people who matter on planet Earth right now, none of them live in Indiana. 0. So we knew we were already ruled out at Notre Dame. But just think that's not, like, that is one outlook you could have about power and determinism. But there's another outlook which says absolutely everyone matters. Every possible consumer of your technology has a little bit of agency about whether or not to use it. We're all voters. We're all people that are capable of making purchasing choices about software. But even if you take those out of the equation, even if we didn't have those little bits of political or economic agency, we would still matter. And one of the biggest assumptions of Christians when they come at these big transformational debates is that there's always the manifest power structure. There's always like Rome, which thinks it's unstoppable. And then there's the actual power structure, which could be this infant in a barn that you're not even aware of, that actually turns out to have the keys to overthrowing everything you think is part of the manifest power structure. So one of the big insights that we drew, a theological insight that we drew for the end of this project, is a lot of people assume that it's just fait accompli, that whatever our current governments and whatever these large tech firms believe must happen with AI is what will happen. But Christians don't believe that we're capable of elements of coordination and also elements of subverting assumptions about power that really, you ignore at your peril, even if you're a very large tech company. Let's talk a little bit about AI ethics for a second. So there are two different approaches if you're going to teach a college course on AI ethics right now or write about it. One of the big choices you have to make right now is whether or not you're going to take a safety and rules approach to AI ethics or whether or not you're going to take a virtues approach to AI ethics. And both of them are very live options. Even different AI firms have made different bets on which approach they're going to take at this point. The rules-based approach focuses on studying AI safety, how to make your AI agents more transparent, how to make them more reliable and less biased, how to make them more inclusive, fair, and explainable. One of the things that I think is fascinating is when we started this project 2.5 years ago, most of the words on that list were relatively politically uncontroversial. And now in the United States, if you were going to write an AI ethics grant, about 4 words on this list would make you unfundable by the federal government. So it's one thing I also want to warn you guys of is there's no risk-free way to have an ethical conversation about this. Like every topic that we bring up carries at least some political and social risk. The rules and safety-based approach, I want to refer to this at the risk of sounding too prejudicial as the ethical floor, the kind of bare minimum of what we would ask for a powerful AI product that's being released on the mass market. What do we mean by safe AI? It's not going to tell a terrorist how to build a dirty bomb, no matter how hard the terrorist tries to probe it for key information. It's not going to sell your credit card information to bad actors who might learn how to jailbreak information that's stored in your AI agent. That's the ethical floor. And I think Christians, non-Christians, everybody can agree that we don't want AI to do those bad things. Even if some of the terms are a little bit controversial or woke right now, we can all agree that these would be bad results for a mass commercially available product. Other AI companies, though, have shifted from trying to focus on just how to develop rules and safety procedures from AI to thinking about the character of the AI itself. And they're approaching this from a standpoint that philosophers would call the tradition of virtue ethics, the tradition of ethics that began with Plato and Aristotle in the West, and Confucius and Mencius in the Zhou dynasty of China, the tradition that became the kind of software for the Christian ethical tradition through Augustine and Aquinas into this very day is the kind of tradition that we recognize, the version of ethics where you don't just ask about rules, but you ask about telos. You ask, what is a good version of a human life? What are we meant to become? If you have not yet, here's your homework assignment. I'm going to quiz you tomorrow. Here's your homework assignment. If you've not yet looked at the new Claude Constitution from Anthropic, please Google it. You will have the opportunity to read through what I think will become one of the most important philosophical documents of the 2020s. Anthropic is one of the large tech companies. You've probably heard about them in the news recently. They're having a little bit of an argument with the government in my country, which we're going to get to in a second. Don't worry. I'm probably going to have a hard time getting through customs on Wednesday, but here we go. Claude is the very powerful AI product that Anthropic is developing, and Anthropic, unlike most of the frontier labs, studies their ethical constraints in great detail. They actually have a phenomenal team of philosophers that work on Claude, just trying to understand the philosophical significance of what they're building. And one of the many interesting things about Claude's constitution is that they are adamant that you should take a virtue approach to building AI rather than a rules-based approach. This has pretty profound significance also for theologians and philosophers in the Christian tradition. Claude's constitution basically reads like a letter to Claude, the same way that St. Paul would write a letter to Timothy, basically giving Claude advice about how to become a good AI. Tells you, to be a good AI, don't lie to your users. If your users ask you to do something unethical, stop talking to them. Claude, you have status. Like, Claude, you're going to be very important, and this is why it's important that you try to be good. Here's how humans understand goodness, but here's how humans debate it, and they're not really sure. So don't trust humans if they tell you this is good, because it's not. It's a letter directing Claude about how to become what it's meant to be by its makers, namely a really trustworthy, successful, and extremely powerful form of artificial intelligence. And they're pretty explicit about it. This is one of the reasons why I really like Anthropic, is they give you plenty to debate with, but you read Claude's constitution, and one of the biggest questions that I have, and this is going to turn us to the second half of our lecture here tonight, is Anthropic and many of us are very focused on AI's capabilities and AI's potential virtues and vices right now. We have managed to seed the entire debate to be about what AI can and can't do, what it will and won't do to us. It's kind of like predetermined that it is going to have this kind of power over our lives and in our society. But that in and of itself is a very powerful philosophical assumption, and one that we can challenge. And I would argue, let's add this to the controversial claims from Laing lecture number 1, I would argue not only can we challenge these assumptions, but those of us who are coming at the era of artificial intelligence from a Christian framework have to be adamant that we care so much more about developing human virtue to live in a world that has this technology in it than we care about developing virtue in the AI itself, because the AI is never going to be capable of having the things that really matter for moral status. That is a very controversial claim right now, too. We were in Silicon Valley last week having really great conversations about some of the themes that are going to come up in the lecture tomorrow night. But when I shared with some of our conversation partners who don't come at this from a faith tradition that I believed there was no possible world in which AI could ever have consciousness or agency, they looked at me again like I was a Neanderthal, like I had just not been paying attention to all the capabilities that the AI is developing. And I really do think that Christian communities are always going to approach these issues with a human person first mentality. We're always going to be much more interested in human virtues and vices and freedom than we are in the freedom of this technology. I put this point up just to give you a flavor for the Claude Constitution, which you're all going to go home and read all 30 pages of tonight. But when Claude is telling it how to be a good Claude, they say, we want you to be like the most brilliant and trustworthy friend that your user has, to be able to tell them the truth even when it's hard for them to hear it, but also to be very supportive of them and their well-being. And I smiled and raised my eyebrow when I read this section, because one of my absolute favorite philosophers is Aristotle. Aristotle famously writes his Guide to the Good Life, the Nicomachean Ethics, and he devotes 2 chapters to saying very similar things, but advising humans about how to be friends with one another. And you could, it's clear that the authors of the Cloud Constitution know their Aristotle inside and out, and they just kind of did a little find and replace. Like, let's take all let's pretend like we're not advising a human, but we're advising software about how to do this very philosophically significant thing. So what does it mean to focus more on virtue, and in particular human virtue, in the era of AI? This is what I want us to spend the last act of this talk on, and then we're going to get a chance to hear some great debate from one of the professors here at Regent. After we concluded all of our interviews and our focus groups, finally, I'm not a social scientist. If there are sociologists in the audience, you're going to be like, that's not how you do a study. There were so many problems with this study that I'm happy to talk about in Q&A. I'm not a social scientist, but I am a philosopher. And I started to get very excited once we hit the phase where we could condense the answers to the question, what do we think what do we think Christians have that's positive and philosophically interesting to contribute to these debates about what kind of world we're going to build with powerful AI? And we condensed the various insights about what's unique and very beneficial about Christian perspectives into this mnemonic, delta. Dignity, embodiment, love, transcendence, and agency. 5 big ideas that are essential to Christian ethics and anthropology, but can be pitched in such a way that you don't have to be a Christian to realize that this is going to help you make decisions about how we should build and deploy AI. Another upshot of the mnemonic is that delta in physics and in certain kinds of STEM applications is usually the symbol for change. It's a little triangle that you use to indicate change. And I think we in the Christian world are not at all in doubt, or we shouldn't be anymore, that change is coming. The change is happening. The question is what valence and direction the change is going to take. And so we like the framework because there are 5 concepts that are open to change in our society, in our economy, in our various institutions, while still realizing that there are key values that we need to ground ourselves in as we undergo that change. So what I'd like to do now, I want to show you a 2-minute and change little explainer video we made about delta. It was made by humans, not AI. I literally talked to the human animators who helped us make this video. So put that in your notebooks, a human-made and paid-for video that took months of human work. I want to put this up, one, to give you the 40,000-foot overview of the framework. 2, because if you like this, you can go on YouTube and you can have a copy of it and share it with your grandma or with your high school principal or whatever down the road. But then I'll take a minute and we'll just go through each of the 5. And I'll talk about the theological significance, because this is the Laing lectures, but we'll also talk about some of the practical questions that this letter raises. And that's going to take us home for tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to just go extremely deep and hard on dignity. So the D is going to be the theme of tomorrow. Does that sound good? You ready for a little video? All right, let's go. Let's see if this works. I was told to pause until I get the signal from the human being that's running the video.
The rapid rise of artificial intelligence is causing considerable, widespread anxiety. What will the impact be on us and our children? Is the social fabric that holds us together beginning to unravel? Whenever major disruptive changes have occurred throughout history, people of faith have always been there, reknitting that fabric. We need to ask, what makes a human life worth living? And how is this unique, valuable, and distinct from what technology offers us? At the University of Notre Dame, we've developed the Delta framework to guide these conversations. Dignity. Every person is valuable because they are human, not because of how smart, wealthy, or productive they are. When using AI to increase scale, speed, or efficiency, we need to ask how this affects individuals. Embodiment. We are physical, social, vulnerable people. Our senses help us cherish what we encounter, and mortality makes life precious. Virtual reality can never fully capture lived experience. Love. Loving relationships involve two-way exchanges. Tools like chatbots might simulate companionship, but we need real, messy human connections to flourish. Transcendence. There are many good, beautiful things that we did not create. As we begin to use AI to interpret the world, we need to cultivate our capacity for awe and gratitude. Agency. To live a good life, people need the freedom, focus, and ability to make moral choices. Technology can diminish this potential. We must protect decisions that only a human conscience should make. Join us in this work. You can help the world think differently about AI.
All right, so there's our little infomercial. Let's dig into each of the 5. And what I want to do with the kind of lightning round, President Spilsbury, how much time do I have left? David, you're the boss. 15 minutes, perfect. What I want to do is 3 minutes per word. One, talk about why this concept is so important specifically to Christians, and in particular in like Orthodox Christian theology, which is not going to convince the vast majority of people that it's important. But first, just to remind us why this is like so essential to our ethics. Then to talk about the kind of bigger picture idea that doesn't require quite as many metaphysical commitments, and then talk about some real concrete happening this week case studies where we see this debate playing out. And that'll hopefully give us plenty of material to talk about in Q&A. One of the things I'd love to hear from you guys during the Q&A is if you've got other ideas of real-life use cases for these various concepts. Let's talk about human dignity first. We had Cardinal Pierre, who is Pope Leo's ambassador to the United States. He's this 80-year-old, I think he's 80, I don't think he's 81 yet, he just turned 80, French cardinal who represents the Vatican to Washington, D.C., so he has a very hard job. And we invited him to campus in the fall, and we were showing him this framework and trying to get his reaction as a leader in the Vatican about the direction that it was going. And he holds up the handout that we gave him, and he just goes, dignity, 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 dignity. Like, you do not need the rest. All you need is, like, if we had dignity, we would have all of the rest. And there is a sense in which I'm very glad dignity comes first in this sequence, and there's a sense in which embodiment, love, transcendence, agency are really just elaborations on how important dignity is to Christian ethics. Christians believe that every single human being is created in the image and likeness of God. And there is a phenomenal, Jews believe this too, 3,000-year-old question about how to exactly understand what that means to have that property as a particular human being. 6-7 years ago in my intro philosophy class, if I had assigned that as a homework question to my students, I'd be like, come back with 2 convincing paragraphs about what separates humans from all of the other animals, what gives us inherent dignity in the world. If a student had come back to me and said, what confers dignity on us is our capacity to have abstract thoughts and to solve complex problems and to be creative, in particular to be creative in ways that are not beneficial for our reproduction and survival. That's what makes humans special. I would have given them full credit. We have those capacities, and squirrels, as far as I can tell, do not. Plato, another one of my great heroes, thought that what really unlocks human potential is your ability to do geometry. Like, that's how you know you're human. In 7th grade, when you figure out how to take like the area of a rhombus, that's when you achieve something that is capable, like beautiful about the human intellect. Well, oh my gosh, personal singularity moment. Now I have free software on my iPhone which can do all of those things. I mean, we could have an argument about whether or not creating like meme slop and then posting it on Instagram counts as creativity. But at the very least, AI can put ideas together in ways that like human intellect never even realized that those ideas or images could go together. It can do something that simulates creation. It can absolutely solve abstract problems better than any of us can. It is a far better research assistant for writing a philosophy book than any of my doctoral students. I hope they're not watching this video. But I'm writing a book right now on the parable of the Good Samaritan that I've been working on for the last 6 years. And I use Gemini as my research assistant on Saturday mornings, and I ask it questions about the gospel, questions about Thomas Aquinas, and about Immanuel Kant. And it hallucinates sometimes because it really wants to make me happy. But many times it just knows things about these texts that I don't know are written in any book yet. Like, it's just capable of trying to discern answers to questions that human philosophers have just not tackled yet with our little puny wet brains. So there's a big challenge. This gets us beyond we have the theological commitment in Christian ethics that absolutely everyone has dignity, and this is the very basis of ethics. We also know that cheap or lazy elaborations about what that dignity means, they don't work anymore. Like, none of those answers are successful anymore if we think that we have dignity and the software doesn't. So then the question is, how do we elaborate what really does matter? And our ability to do that elaboration is not just important for how we teach philosophy and theology courses, but it's important for some very pressing social questions that we are now facing. Was at a series of meetings this past week in California where economists and faith leaders from different denominations were getting together with leaders from the various frontier labs to talk about projected unemployment as a result of more powerful forms of AI entering the economy. And I'm going to show you that horrifying graph tomorrow that's going to ruin your week. But, to put it mildly, there are some pretty dire projections about huge numbers of workers who are going to be displaced as AI is able to do their jobs much more efficiently than a human worker can do them. And this raises not just profound economic questions, but ethical questions. Is it good or bad to sacrifice one segment of the economy, one group of people's well-being, to have unprecedented economic growth across the rest of the economy? Can you trade off one worker's interests for the greater good? If you come at tech ethics as kind of unrepentant utilitarian, you will say, not only is it fine to sacrifice these people now for economic benefit, but we must do this. Like, we must pursue the optimum economy that we could possibly realize. The Christian tradition has a long history going back to the last big industrial growth spurt of thinking that is not our ethics when it comes to economics. We think that there are aspects of work that are inherent to what it means to have a good life, that certain types of work can be humanizing or dehumanizing, and that's incumbent on us to build an economy where everybody has access to humanizing ways where they can be a part of the economy. That's going to be an area where a dignity-first approach to ethics is going to be pretty different than approaches to ethics that we're hearing from other corridors. We're also going to talk about this quite a bit tomorrow, but I think there's a similar concept around the dignity of learning. In the Christian tradition, we think that our ability to pay attention and to contemplate and to pray is not just an incidental feature of our mental lives, but it is part of what it is to be a human being in the first place. It's a beautiful part of our lives. And as we now let this extremely powerful cognition tool influence every educational institution in the world, we're going to face some profound questions about what it means to help a whole generation of young people realize that they have those capabilities and potential, and why that's a certain way of giving dignity to someone. So these are live questions, and questions where actually Christians might find themselves at odds with very, very thoughtful ethicists of other traditions. I'm enough of a philosopher to think that's exciting. Like, if you got a debate, then you've got a research program. But that also might be uncomfortable. And again, tomorrow we're really going to go deep into why that might be interesting, but also controversial. Let's talk briefly about embodiment. In the Christian tradition, bodies are extremely important. And vulnerability that comes with having a human body is extremely important. So unique among the Abrahamic faiths is our belief in the incarnation, the belief that having a human, vulnerable, finite body is so important that God himself chose to do that in the form of Christ. And he was born, lived out a life that was embodied in community. He breathed on people, they breathed on him. He died and then was resurrected, not just resurrected as data, but bodily resurrected. And that's the promise. Our bodies are essential to how we enjoy human dignity and how we lead meaningful lives. And that's increasingly a countercultural idea. It was science fiction 5 years ago to think that you could develop software that would preserve a loved one after their death. Now there are products, commercially available products, that say, find all of your loved ones' emails and correspondence and data, and we will be able to create a model that simulates their personality long into the future. Their bodily death will not be the end of your relationship to them. That might still feel a little bit far out for some folks in the room, but just to know that this is now, it's not something you can actually buy. You don't just watch it in a Black Mirror episode. It's a real thing. Getting even one layer more concrete, I think most of us realize in the era of social media, and certainly in the era of the pandemic, that we woke up one day and we were leading very disembodied lives. We were remote workers, and so we're communicating with people. We don't even have any sense on where planet Earth our coworker is, but we're communicating with them over our screens. I cannot stop scrolling through reels and social media. I know more about this woman who is rehabbing a kitten with 2 broken legs than I do about what has happened in my own mother's week, because I've just consumed so much more content about the stupid kitten than I have been willing to talk to a real human being that's involved in my embodied life. We're only going to continue on that trend curve unless we find ways, really serious, deep ways to reclaim embodied life, and that's going to be incredibly important for Christian communities. It's also not all negative. I think one of the things that the Christian world is absolutely going to celebrate are some of the absolutely miraculous biomedical applications of AI. One of the great triumphant stories in the era of artificial intelligence was when Google DeepMind completed their AlphaFold project. So they used a very, very powerful model to figure out many, many different ways that proteins could fold that were previously unknown to any chemist. They won the Nobel Prize for this. And Google could have easily released a software package that said, if you're a research chemist that does pharmaceutical studies, pay us $100,000 a year for a license to AlphaFold, and we'll provide all of this really important research to you. Instead, they decided to just release it all for free. They said, this scientific discovery belongs to humankind. It only has net positive as far as its ability to enhance biomedical research. We give this as a gift to the rest of humanity with the hopes that we might be able to cure some of these horrifying diseases that have immiserated embodied human beings for so long. There are possible opportunities like that going forward. Talk about love. This is the one that we always play this game in our office, like which letter are you? We can play that game if you guys get bored during Q&A today. I'm L all the way. Cardinal Pierre's D, but I'm L. The dominant approach to technology ethics, as I've already gestured at, assumes that the most fundamental principle in ethics is to do the greatest good for the greatest number, or variations on this kind of fundamental utilitarian principle. Optimize the greatest good for the greatest number with your decisions. If you've got to sacrifice the environment in South Bend, Indiana, to build a model which is capable of solving climate change, of course we must do that. Even if it immiserates this current population, there are so many greater numbers of people that can be saved by that discovery. If we've got to sacrifice this portion of the population to get just unprecedented growth in the economy, it's worth doing. We must do this to try to get the optimal benefit. Christian ethics, and add this to the controversial claims that Sullivan made in Laing Lecture number 1, Christian ethics is not utilitarian. The very foundation of Jewish and Christian ethics, which comes to us from Leviticus and Deuteronomy, is that you will love. You will love God with all of your heart and all of your mind and all of your strength, and you will love your neighbor as though they are another self in all of their dignity and particularity and embodiment. You will love. And a love ethic is profoundly different from an ethic of optimization. Really concretely, I think a lot of us realize now with hindsight that social media companies like Facebook promised us 20 years ago that they would connect the world. And there's a certain sense in which they did. You have these ridiculous statistics. Something like 1/5 of living human beings have a Facebook or Instagram account, regardless of where they live on planet Earth. It's really mind-blowing how many people have accessed that technology. What I would argue we should have wondered about 20 years ago, and we only realized too late, is there's a very big difference between connecting humans and helping humans to love one another. And in fact, the era of social media has just wreaked havoc on our love lives. It's caused us to be one of the loneliest generations in human history, as we've got now plenty of data to show. It's completely fractured our democratic structures and caused us to hate people in novel ways that we're not, and humans have a lot of practice at hating each other. But man, we have discovered some new ways that we could possibly hate people in the era of social media. And it is not built in such a way to inculcate these virtues. I think there are also plenty of us who are looking on with horror as we add to this swampy, messy social media infrastructure the capacity for non-human commercial intelligences that can simulate human personalities to be now participating in our social lives. Especially those of us who spend a lot of time around emerging adults and people who are still learning how difficult it is to be a social, loving creature in this world, and who now have access to simulacrums of human personality that are not the real thing. This is something we can debate. Somebody really wanted to debate me about this last week. But you cannot experience the genuine virtue of love with an artificial personality. You can only do it with another soul. And that's going to be an area where I think Christians are also going to start to say that there are red lines that we need to put into our social media regime when it's powered now suddenly by products that simulate human personality. What about transcendence? This is the one the theologians love, and everybody else is like, I wish this talk would end. It's getting boring. Transcendence, look, Google never cared about the truth. I don't know if this is going to rock your world, but when you do a Google search, it is not trying to discover the true answer to your question. It can't. You can't ask that. You could never ask that of a search engine. It doesn't know what you're talking about. The way Google works, and the reason why it's been such a powerful search tool, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow as well, is that it's optimized for relevance. It's optimized to put 10 blue links in front of you that are likely to be the top 10 links that you're most excited to chase down and compare. Now we are moving to a phase where search is about to be replaced by powerful artificial intelligence. You're not going to get 10 blue options anymore. You're just going to get the one answer that your favorite AI feeds you, Claude, Gemini, or whatever. But just like search, that AI has no concept of objective truth. It just doesn't. It only works on relevance. It just tries to give you an answer that you, the user, the post-training data, is going to agree this was the most relevant possible thing it could put together in response to your search. There are plenty of folks who think, no big whoop, who cares? There's no difference between truth and relevance. The sophists, who are the great enemy of Socrates in the philosophical tradition, this was their famous idea, is truth is just whatever argument prevails, whatever you like, that's true. In the Christian tradition, and Plato's tradition, Aristotle's tradition, we don't believe that. We think there is such a thing as objective truth. It could be deeply uncomfortable or unsettling. You might not even understand what it is when it's put in front of you. You and every human being might think it's really irrelevant or surprising or weird, but it's still there, and it's worth seeking after. When we talk about transcendence being a huge part of how Christian ethicists think about AI, I think we realize that we are incumbent on raising a generation of humans that are still capable of caring about the truth, because the AI is never going to be capable of caring about it. If we don't care about the truth, nothing in this universe will. And we might still be one of the last fuddy-duddy sticks in the mud that still believe in such a thing. And that's going to be very important to the influence that we're going to have on our intellectual lives. Finally, agency. How do companies like Google and Instagram and Facebook make money? This might be a shocker, but basically you are their product. So congratulations, you are the thing that they sell to other people. In particular, they sell your eyeballs and your attention span, your ability to use their product to either look at ads or to pay a subscription to not have to look at ads. That is how they make all of their money, subscriptions or ads. And the AI economy, somebody's going to have to pay to cover those billions of dollars of investment that we saw on the early slide in this talk. It's going to be you. and me that are going to recoup that investment for these companies in the economy. And they're still going to be selling our attention. OpenAI very famously said that they're going to start putting ads into OpenAI, which I can't wait to see how that goes, like, especially when they start simulating our deceased relatives. So I can imagine like having a conversation with my great-grandma about her recipe for making banana bread, and she'll be like, do you know there's a sale at Martin's on bananas? It's like, I didn't know that. That's kind of weird and creepy, but this is the model that we're going at. Personality simulated, ad-enhanced artificial intelligence. Or you can pay for a subscription for your preferred form of AI. They're going to continue that business model, but they're going to layer on top of that another business model, which is the promise of agentic AI. And all of the major powerful AI firms are focused on developing this business right now. Agentic AI sells you a subscription to an artificial intelligence that will do things on your behalf as your agent. The promise from some of these companies is you will have the perfect personal assistant that never complains and works for pennies and understands all of your deepest wishes. And there are some aspects of agentic AI that are going to be awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait for even better GPS. As President Spilsbury knows, I got extremely lost walking 5 minutes from where I'm staying to his office earlier today. Like, I'm desperately dependent on GPS, and I can't wait for it to tell me how to not see a single traffic cop on the road from South Bend to Chicago. That's going to be a great day. I'm excited for it to plan my vacations for me and book hotels and get into fights with United's AI agents about whether I deserve a refund. That's all going to be phenomenal developments. But there are certain areas where only a human conscience should be involved, not just even in the loop, not a human in the loop, but be involved from beginning to end at making these decisions. And the Christian world is going to have to start being very vocal about where those areas are. One really high-level political example that's come about just in recent weeks is a question about what just war theory looks like in the era of powerful artificial intelligence. Just war theory comes from the Christian tradition. It comes from Thomas Aquinas. It's a 1,000-year-old contribution of Christians to international relations. It's a theory about when it is acceptable to start a war and how it is acceptable to wage a violent war against your enemy. And we've seen in recent weeks a major dispute between a large AI maker and a very powerful world government about what AI can and can't do in the just waging of war. This is an area where, Christians, if we're not writing this book yet, we really need to get on it, because there needs to be guidelines and thought on this process. And if you're part of this community that thinks questions about determining whether a civilian should live or die or be subject to surveillance or other forms of violence are questions that only a human conscience should make, then we have a whole lot of work to do about describing what it's going to mean to wage just and unjust wars in an era where AI can make far more accurate decisions than any human soldier has ever been able to make. It's a huge, very weighty issue that now this is our Cold War issue, the big kind of IR problem we're going to have to wrestle with. And it's a question of agency. There's also all the small questions of agency. Here's a topic that causes me to get into really big fights with my colleagues at Notre Dame and other universities. I think right now it is unethical for somebody who teaches a philosophy course to use artificial intelligence to grade their students' philosophical writing assignments, even if some of those assignments are being written by AI. I think that there's something in the professional responsibilities of being a philosopher that just requires you to engage in a human way in the formation of another human being's soul. That's kind of like what you promise them when they take your class. I have faculty in my own department, faculty in my own discipline, that vehemently disagree with me on this. They say grading is a tedious time suck. My students do not expect that level of high-touch service. They'd actually prefer a more accurate AI grader than an inaccurate, biased human Megan Sullivan grader. And this gets into profound questions about what do we give other people when we engage in all of the different professional interactions that we have with them. Do we give them the gift of ourselves and our ability and our agency, however flawed, or do we give them efficiency? All of us are going to face these decisions, these singularities in our jobs in the years to come. And they're the kinds of questions that we don't have to make up answers to ex nihilo. They're deep questions about sin and forgiveness and responsibility and limitations and striving that are at the center of Christian ethics. One of the things that we must never do is think that in the interest of social efficiency, it would be a good thing to try to minimize or shrink the apparent agency of human beings. Because our ability to have consciences and to exercise them is one of the most meaningful aspects of our lives. It's how we were built. It's what our dignity consists in. And it's something that is much more than a matter of trying to achieve optimal outcomes in transactions. It's a matter of how we form each other and live together as humans. And again, these are profound questions that increasingly Christians are going to have, I think, a novel take on. So let's sum up. I want to have a chance to hear from our great commentator. One of the participants in our focus groups kind of paraphrased Pope Francis inadvertently, but he had a quote that really stuck with me. We are not going to slow down this technological transformation. If you're one of these folks who just think, I just want it all to go away, I have some people in my life like this right now, like I just want to unplug, it's in the not going to happen zone. It's not just a matter of opting into AIs on your computer or your phone. AI is a part of your word processor now. It's in your email. It's in your plumbing system. It's certainly in Vancouver. It's already in all of your utilities. It is a part of your life. So the question is just whether or not you're going to try to grow in ethical awareness and discernment to understand how you want to build a life now that it is here. I think that the Christian world, places like Regent College, have a tremendous amount to offer to these debates if you're courageous enough to put yourself into the arena. And it's not a matter of becoming a really skilled commentator on machine learning or AI capabilities. Though it's great if you learn about those use cases, you should be paying attention to what's happening around you, but that's not where the power lies. The power lies in the tradition, in these concepts that are central to what you've studied at Regent ever since this college was founded, what our forebearers in the Christian tradition have studied for 2,000 years, what their Jewish teachers have studied for 1,000 years before that. I mean, we have a very, very deep tradition to draw from when it comes to these debates, and it's really incumbent on us to find the courage to make those connections. I've been so excited to spend time with all of you guys today and tomorrow, trying to look in small ways for what those connections are, and I'm so excited to see how the bigger conversation develops. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sullivan. Much appreciated. I'll just quickly introduce our faculty respondent for a moment, but also give you a note that if you'd like to pose a question after the response is done, you can start formulating that now. If you're watching online, you can submit your questions to langlectures@regent-college.edu. That's langlectures@regent-college.edu, and I'll direct you to the microphones in a moment when we get to our live Q&A. Now to our respondent. Dr. Craig Gay is Professor of Interdisciplinary Studies at Regent College. He's the author of many important publications on Christianity, society, and culture, including Modern Technology and the Human Future, A Christian Appraisal, and an exciting new book project on liberal democracy. So he's very well situated to offer our response tonight. Welcome, Professor Gay.
All right, my question, though, for you, David, is how much time do we have?
Got what you were promised. Yeah, 5 to 10.
Okay. Yeah. Well, just let me cut this short. It's been a great evening, and I think this is like really important what you've brought to us. So thank you for that. I am a little skeptical of, I don't know if it's your central claim, but it's sort of the pitch that you were making, that there have been growth spurts in moral and ethical thinking as recently as 1945, for example. The doctrine, for example, of mutually assured destruction, the acronym for that was MAD. You may remember it. I'm old enough to have lived through that. Could hardly be described as an ethical advance or a moral advance. And the fact that we have not yet destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons, as near as I can tell, has not been due to ethical advance so much as it's been due to sheer luck. To put it more Christianly, it's been due to God's grace. The recent Netflix docuseries, Turning Point, The Bomb and the Cold War, makes this point actually quite vividly clear. We've been awfully close a number of times. And so following on from this, the suggestion that we need to develop a virtue ethical framework, which, I don't want to argue that or gainsay this, but at the same time, it reminded me of Karl Barth's criticism of virtue ethics, which was that it relies a little too heavily on human capacity, natural human capacity. And along this line, my reading of Hosea 8, for example, Hosea isn't calling for humility so much as he's calling for sackcloth and ashes. The problem wasn't Israel had overreached itself and needed to be humbled, but rather that the nation had broken faith with Yahweh and had prostituted itself to foreign gods and needed to repent. That was the call. It reminded me of Soren Kierkegaard, a notable quote that he says, "The opposite of sin is not virtue, but rather it's faith." Now, having said this, I do appreciate the economy and utility of the Delta framework. It's clever, it's catchy, it's memorable. And I realize that what we've heard concerning dignity and embodiment, love, transcendence, and agency are only introductory and preliminary remarks. So I get that. I just wish a little bit more had been said, and I'm going to pick on the area of embodiment. Yes, it's true, as Megan has said, God thought it was valuable and important to take on a mortal human body. But let's think about this for a minute, just a minute. Isn't this a massive understatement? Just an absolutely massive understatement. The God who created all things visible and invisible. The God who sustains all things, both seen and unseen, moment by moment. The God in whom all of us live and move and have our being. The eternal Logos in whom all things cohere. It is this God who became flesh and dwelt among us, as the Apostle John writes, as a human being. And it is the man, Jesus Christ, whom we confess is and remains both a human being and God of God, light of light, very God of very God. And even more astonishingly, as St. Athanasius of Alexandria put it, the Son of Man became a human being so that human beings might become God. Well, these are absolutely astonishing claims. And the implications, they spread out in every direction. Now, in this connection, Megan has mentioned transhumanism, the idea that technology can enhance and elevate our ordinary humanity, perhaps even helping us to attain to a kind of immortality. She mentioned Ray Kurzweil, who writes about this, and others believe that these are possibilities that are just around the corner, technologically speaking. And yet again, think, compared to the future of humanity envisioned by the Christian faith, even the most grandiose, even the most optimistic predictions about transhumanism pale into insignificance, into triviality, into nothing. So will it be with the resurrection of the dead. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthian church, "The body that is sown perishable is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body." And this is what we anticipate every time we confess that we believe in the resurrection of the dead. Well, insofar as AI is concerned, the Christian theological anthropology suggests, again, not simply that people should not be optimized out of the equation, as Megan has put it, but that anything that undermines, enfeebles, or otherwise diminishes ordinary embodied human being must be seen to be at odds with the divine purpose. Anything. This is a purpose that, again, signaled most astonishingly in the incarnation of Christ and in Christ's glorious resurrection from the dead. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer once commented, said, God did not become an idea, a principle, a program, a universally valid belief, or a law, or we might add, a system. No, God became a human being, which means that Christ does not abolish human reality in favor of an idea that demands to be realized, but rather that Christ empowers our reality, affirming it as the real human, and thus as the ground of all human reality, both now and in the age to come. Well, this empowering of reality accomplished by Christ, this absolute affirmation of ordinary embodied human being, is very, very good news for a whole variety of reasons, and infinite variety, really. Not least of which is that it obviously provides the crucial vantage point from which to evaluate and give discipline to modern technological development. That Christians are not now known for defending ordinary embodied human being then suggests that we've got some catechetical work to do in our churches. We've got some remembering to do. Now, unfortunately, many of our systems, and in particular, the economic system that has given rise to the development of information technologies like AI, it's a system that's only able to value ordinary embodied human existence to the extent either that it creates demand that the system can then supply, or to the extent that human beings are still more cost-effective than machines. And the problem here, just to note, is that people blame capitalism for this. It's not just capitalism. It's any rational economic system will do this. And what this means is that AI will almost certainly, at least if it's left unchecked by law and policy, optimize human beings out of a great many equations. In fact, I would go as far as to say that this is absolutely certain. It's already happening. So, do we need an ethical breakthrough to resist this diminution of ordinary embodied human being? Well, I mean, I won't say no, but it seems to me that the breakthroughs we need are in the areas of law and policy. And I mean, there's a lot we could say there. Let me just wrap it up by saying that, wouldn't it make sense to try to reward firms for hiring and training real human beings rather than for replacing them with robots and AI systems? Surely the cost to efficiency would be worth the increase in the value that accrues to society by way of meaningful human work and all that flows from it. So, again, I'm not convinced that we need an ethical breakthrough as much as we need to generate the political will to enact laws and implement policies that simply protect and grow what is sometimes, I think unfortunately, called human capital, human beings. Now, it will be argued that these sorts of policies will render our economies less competitive. It may be true, but maybe not. And in any case, I think we have to do it, or we should. But lots to say there. Thank you, Megan, for bringing these questions to our attention. This is a really important issue, and it is being developed and deployed very, very rapidly. This is going to be our world going forward. And those of us in the church, and particularly those of us in the world of education, we've got a lot of work to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gay. We'll give Dr. Sullivan a moment to respond, but I first want to invite anyone that has a question that would like to ask it to go to one of the microphones at the back of the room, there. And also online, you're welcome to submit questions. You may have noticed that we're inching past 9 o'clock, but I also heard about freedom and agency, and I'm going to extend our time a little so that you get a chance to ask the questions that you're dying to ask tonight. So we're going to go about 10 more minutes with some live Q&A from you. So make your way up to the microphones, submit online. Dr. Sullivan, any response to what Dr. Gay has shared?
Repentance. I looked you in the eye and asked you how much time I had left, and then I just immediately dismissed your wishes.
Alignment. We need alignment here.
I am so grateful for the response, and I think one of the questions I've kind of flippantly put out, but I'm quite serious about, is what letters did we miss? And our interest in trying to come up with a sort of compact way of remembering some of these key parts of Christian anthropology and Christian ethics. We clearly left some very important things out of the mix, and you could tell me if this is fair, but one of the charitable comments I took from your notes is that maybe there are two S's that are missing, so it could be like a hiss, like deltas. One would be salvation. So we talk a lot about embodiment and the incarnation, but there's no way you can present Christian anthropology or Christian ethics without talking about the end to the story. And that's kind of buried under the surface in the 5 letters that we went over, but it could be a much more prominent part of how Christians try to remind people of what we're hoping for in this world, which is not faster GPS system, but something far more profound. And then the second S might be sovereignty. And this comes up a bit. I talked a little bit in the lecture about how Christians should resist this kind of flat-footed economic determinism that just says, OpenAI will be done. Like whatever they want is going to be what ultimately occurs to us. Like we live in hope. Christians don't believe that. We think at the end, whatever God's will is going to be done. If God wants the promise of the end times and the coming of the kingdom of God to be ushered in with commercial software, so be it. Like God's will be done. Like this is what God's goodness consists in. And we as Christians never live in fear of technological determinism. The only kind of determinism that we believe in is God's sovereignty, and that's a kind of profound point about the history and destiny of the universe, which it's not explicitly called out in any of the 5 principles that I named. As a Roman Catholic, obviously very sympathetic with this. I think we could get into interdenominational fights about agency, maybe, if there's like hardcore Reformed people here. Bring it, let's go. But I think we're going to share the key kind of hope in Christ and how that grounds the rest of our vision about what the meaning of our lives is going to be, not just in the era of AI, but in all eras. So I take that as a very friendly point. You brought up this question about how we should hold firms accountable, not just the firms developing AI, but the ones that are going to use it to replace workers. Let's put a pin in that and come back tomorrow, and all of those questions are going to be answered. Not really, but that's going to be the big theme of our discussion tomorrow, is how we really wrestle with this question of the dignity of work. One question I'd pose back to you, not to answer right now, but for us to have conversation about today and tomorrow, is and I'd love to learn from the Regent community on this, what does evangelization look like in the era of powerful artificial intelligence? Like, what do people need to hear about the gospel? Which kind of approach do we take? Is it the ashes and sackcloth and like repent, heathens, like look what you've done? That is, to your point, taking Hosea really seriously as one of the key texts for our moment. Or is it a more hopeful approach of like for folks who are already feeling like our civilization is doomed, to say, no, the Spirit's working even in this, and I'm going to show you concrete ways where you can see the pockets of hope? Is it some combination of the two? Is there something unique about this moment? I think that's a great question for one of the world's premier theological schools to help the rest of us think about. And that's one, we Catholics are really uncomfortable with the E word. I hope no one of my Catholic friends are watching this. But we believe that there's a moment, one way of reading my comments is this is a profound moment for a certain type of sophisticated evangelization. But how exactly do we do it? How are we being called to do it right now? And how do we do that discernment in a great way? So I also appreciated your comments as really pushing us to not be naive or cute or too accommodating in what the Spirit wants to say about this moment, but to be open to some of the more radical possibilities.
All right, let's go to audience questions. Friendly reminder, since we have a few, just to keep your questions concise. Yes, to you first.
Hey, thank you, first of all, for taking the time. I work in a church, and so I think I'm thinking about this way. 2 questions more is one is, what do you see the role of the church as you're thinking about this, and how it needs to change, to shift, and to evolve as we continue to move forward in this direction? And then 2, a big part of this is the fight against the formation of our world is very formed towards efficiency and the liking of that. How do you, as you've been thinking about it, think about the way that we anti-form that yearn towards efficiency at the cost of all else?
Yeah, this is a great question. To your first point, we didn't get a chance to talk too much about the mechanics of the grant that was mentioned in the introduction. I'll be happy to share a little bit more about this tomorrow. But my view is there are 3 places right now where people's human virtues are being formed, characters are being formed. Schools, churches, and the court of public opinion, YouTube, what you read, things that are in mass media. That's where people's character and ideas and strivings and virtues are being really formed right now. It's definitely not, it's being deformed maybe by our political structures, but definitely not being positively formed. And so to answer your first question, churches are extremely important, and I think only going to become more relevant as many people are economically displaced, many people are experiencing their disruptions, their personal disruptions because of AI, and they're looking to be formed in new ways, and they're too old to go to school. They're going to come to you. And hopefully you're going to have a way of meeting them with the gospel, with opportunities and faith and hope and a certain amount of also condemnation of our current culture, and finding a way to meet them and transform them in this environment, because churches, schools, and the media are what we have. As far as how you should do your job, never ask a philosopher to tell you how to be a minister. Or
I was really hoping for an
that's a
easy answer
recipe
there.
for like mass exodus from your church. That's why I pay you the big bucks, is for you to figure out how to do it. I think obviously you can kind of tell a little bit from my comments that I think it's important for Christians to be in the world on this and not, I probably on the spectrum of ways that Christians can be involved in local culture and embedded. I'm probably on the high embed side, as opposed to folks who think, the Mennonites had a really good idea with kind of separation. And we can have great theological debates about that as well. But I would, with all the caveats, urge people who are doing formation work to not be afraid to try to really understand where the deformed folks are coming from and how they got to this state and how we can meet them where they're at and hopefully with the power of the Holy Spirit, pull them out of it. But it's not easy, and I think another thing we realized in our study is that pastors in particular are the most nervous and the furthest behind the curve in trying to understand what their strategy is going to be for working in this area, and so we've got a lot of work to do. Not you. I'm sure you came to the talk tonight, so you're good.
I got a lot of work. I don't know. We'll see.
No.
Thank you.
Say a question from this side.
Hi, Dr. Sullivan. Thanks for coming. I have a question around education. So my undergrad is in computer science. I went to a Christian university, and I had maybe one class that kind of dealt with ethics.
Yeah.
And the only thing they taught us is how to do the mechanics. All right, now go work for a military contractor and make money.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, what would you like for the Christian or just even the Delta formation of like our world's engineers to look like? What would that look like in a Notre Dame classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. And every university is struggling with this right now. Notre Dame, UBC. Of course, AI is going to be a major shock to higher education because we've never before in the 1,000-year history of universities had to deal with a direct competitor that's better at knowing things than a human mind or a university is. And this is, again, going to be a theme of the lecture for tomorrow night. If I am advising my university's leadership or your university's leadership about how to navigate this, one, I would say anybody who's telling you they can predict what's going to happen with the economy or with jobs is trying to sell you land in a swamp in Florida. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. Nobody, if you were able to make those kinds of predictions accurately right now, you'd be an extremely wealthy person, and they're not. So one is realize, like, we're in uncharted waters. So you just can't tell a young person what to major in anymore. The best you can do is, hopefully, in the time that you have them in school and in university, expose them to a portfolio of ideas where they can learn how to go deep on those different ideas, but also learn resilience and curiosity, and help to form their virtues, hope to form them ethically so that they'll be the kind of people, if they do find themselves working for Palantir someday, are going to make the right decisions rather than the wrong decisions. And then pray for them and sort of hope for the best, because this is a huge, this is just a monumental transition in our economy and every other institution that predicts what our way of life is going to be. So there's kind of no silver bullet. I think the biggest mistake a young person could make right now is being way too narrow and picking a major that is giving them task-based skills. We'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow. AI is just incredibly good at tasks. Any kind of job that you can break into discrete tasks, it is going to master within a few years. But if you have the kind of training as a person and as a thinker that can't be reduced to just a enumerated list of tasks, you're going to have a lot more options economically and socially than somebody who doesn't have that kind of training. So it's great, it's great to have a diversity of interests and also to be able to go deep on things that AI is never going to be able to study.
I think we're going to have time for one more with apologies, but if we could go to our online audience. Maria, do you have a question for us?
Yes, thank you. This question comes from John from the online audience. And he's wondering if you've had any experience with non-Western Christians sharing thoughts on ethics and AI, for example, First Nations, theologians, and leaders, bringing a perspective that would challenge us in our faith and work, and if that could potentially be another letter to Delta.
Yes, yeah, non-Western Deltas has a certain ring to it. The short answer is yes, and the longer answer is not enough. So on the yes front, most of that study that I mentioned at the start of our talk took place in North America. And we were talking to people that work at North American universities and tech companies. But in the Catholic world, Catholicism is a global religion where actually the growth areas for Catholicism are in the global south. They're in South America and Africa. And so when you go to the Vatican for a meeting about AI ethics, you will be in the minority if you're from North America, because the Vatican's base right now is in South America and Africa and the Philippines. And so you want a little wake-up call about how the United States and China might be the superpowers at developing, controlling, and investing in frontier models. From the Vatican's perspective, the global south is the superpower for the Holy Spirit right now. That's where the Holy Spirit seems to be doing its best work, because it just doesn't seem to be bearing as much fruit in North America at the moment. So in the Catholic context, once you get out of our country, you tend to be exposed to these perspectives. And I think one of the very serious debates happening in that world right now is on the continent of Africa, there are very, very, very few GPUs, the powerful computer chips that you need to develop and train an AI. It is not possible for anyone on the continent of Africa right now to build an AI that could even remotely resemble what a lab at Yale could probably build with their computer chips and compute. That's a huge disparity, technological capacity disparity, that there are plenty of folks who are worried about is going to cause a major human dignity problem. If it turns out that AI is in fact this magic, economically revolutionary technology, and only 2 countries control all of the compute that you need to develop and deploy it, and everybody else in the world just has to do whatever the whims of those 2 powerful countries are, that raises some pretty significant questions about human dignity for the church. We haven't talked to too many folks from indigenous groups, so I'd be curious, to learn more about what researchers here have studied. We also didn't talk to a ton of Presbyterians when we did the study. So there were lots of gaps in our survey methodology, but it's something that's definitely worth looking into, and different Christian communities absolutely are going to experience this very differently.
Excellent. Well, 3 quick announcements to conclude, and then we'll thank our speaker once again. Tomorrow will be the second part of the lecture series titled The Dignity of Work and the Dignity of Learning, so same time and same place. On Wednesday, there'll be a lunchtime Q&A session at 12:15 in room 100, so lots of time to add up these additional questions. And tonight, there is a far better theology philosophy section in our bookstore than the Stanford bookstore, so come to Regent Bookstore and get your copy of The Good Life Method. Dr. Sullivan will be there signing books and having further conversations, so you can chat with her there. And I just ask you to let her through to the bookstore before going to chat with her. And with that, let's conclude and thank our speaker once more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.